Hi, everybody. This is part 2 of my December and January wrap-up video. I decided to split my review videos this month into 2 different videos because I didn't want my review video to be an hour long because I wasn't sure how long me talking about books would hold their attention. So for this month's topic, I decided to focus on regarding reading. I decided to read books with disabled protagonists. So I have 4 books to review today. The first one is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This is a fantasy book that came out a couple of years ago that was really hyped up on all the booktubers channels. Destiny has talked about it, Rachel has talked about it, Sarah has talked about it, and Halli has talked about it, I think. So this is a fantasy book set in the similar vein of universe to Harry Potter or How to Train Your Dragon. It takes place at a school for dragon riders, and basically the main character, Violet, is in the school for scribes, but she really wants to be in the school for dragon fighters. But her mother doesn't want her to be a dragon fighter because she has cerebral palsy and she doesn't think she can handle it and thinks it's too dangerous for her. I love Violet's character, and I really love the disability representation because I thought it was really cool that there is a character in a fantasy novel that has my disability of cerebral palsy, and I can't wait to read the sequel to this book to see how the relationship between Xaden and Violet develops, because they're one of my favorite book couples in books that I read last year. I started this book the week before Christmas and finished it on December 28th. So I read this book at the very end of December. The next book I wanted to talk about today is List of 10 by Halli Gomez. So this book is about a teenage boy who's in middle school or high school. I think he's in high school because he's 16 and he's learning to drive. So, this boy in this book, his name is Troy, and he has Tourette syndrome and anxiety and depression. So there are trigger warnings in here for depression and suicide attempts, just to let you guys know ahead of time. Troy falls in love with the girl in his a girl in his class, Corey, and the buildup of their relationship is very sweet. So, Troy puts together a list of 10 things he wants to do because he's suicidal and he wants to basically commit suicide. So he creates a list of 10 things he wants to do before he dies. And I don't want to spoil the ending, but it is happy. This book, I love the relationship between Troy and Corey. It's really sweet. And I also like the relationship that Troy has with his baby brother, Jade. It's very cute and very heartwarming. One of the discussion questions at the back of the book is, do you know someone who is either neurodivergent or disabled and spends most of their time by themselves? How could you include that person? So this gives me an opportunity to talk about me and how I can relate to Troy's character. So I am neurodivergent. I have a disability on the autism spectrum. And yeah, sometimes it can be very difficult and isolating to have autism and anxiety like Troy has. I've never been suicidal before, so I cannot relate to Troy in the way that he's making a list of 10 things he wants to do before he commits suicide. But I can definitely relate to him and how he feels with being anxious and stuff like that. So I really love the representation in this book of somebody with anxiety, and I will get to another book in just a moment that focuses on a character with anxiety. The next book I wanted to talk about is Torch by Lynn Miller Lachmann. This author, it's really neat because she has autism spectrum disorder like I do, and she wrote a historical fiction novel that is set in the 1960s during, it looks like the war that ended the Soviet Union. I don't remember what war that was, but the character in this book that has my disability of autism, his name is Thomas, and I can relate to him the most. He has a fascination with trains, and he is very, what's the word I want? It's in a discussion question. Let me find it. Main hobbies and interests. So, trains is a very big interest of Thomas's, and I can relate to him because I have many things that I'm interested in that I'm kind of have hyperfixations on. Like, for example, the TV show Friends, as you can see from all my past videos from the past 10 months or so about reviewing Friends episodes, reviewing Matthew Perry's movies, sharing my fan fictions for Friends, all of that kind of stuff. Another thing I'm very highly interested in is musical theater. That is the whole purpose for this blog in the first place. Reviewing books on here is sort of a side hustle that I do, but mainly this blog focuses on reviewing musical theater performances and performances of plays or movie musicals. But since COVID-19 shut theaters down and theaters were closed for 18 months, I had to find other content to use. So that's when I redirected my focus to talk about movies and most recently books on the blog. I mean, the reason why I'm reviewing books these days is more so because I'm still not seeing as many shows in theaters as I was before I moved away and before COVID-19 started. Before COVID-19 shut theaters down, Matt and I were probably seeing like 3 or 4 shows a month, but now because of budget constraints and scheduling constraints, we only see like 1 or 2 plays every 1 or 2 months. So the theater review posts that we do on YouTube will be very spread out over certain amounts of time to give us more time to gather all our notes to review the plays efficiently. I really like the found family that Thomas has with his friends, Stefan, Lydia, and what's the other kid's name? Pavlov. So Pavlov and Lydia are a couple, and they end up having a child together. Pavlov is a revolutionary who is in a military resistance, and he dies in a fire at a college campus that the revolutionaries start. So something that his fiance has to deal with is deciding whether or not she wants to keep the child or have an abortion. So that's not something I can really relate to because I don't think my partner and I plan on having children. So I can't really relate to how Lydia feels in that particular part of the book. But I certainly felt terrible for her that she was considering getting an abortion. So I love this book because I love the disability representation of Thomas's character who has autism spectrum disorder. And I also loved learning about a part of history that we didn't really get to learn a lot about in school, because in high school and middle school we learn a lot about like the Holocaust, the 1960s. Not this particular war, I think, that happened, or maybe it wasn't a war, maybe it was just some big political upheaval. This whole political upheaval thing with the Soviet Union, I think it happened at the end of the 1960s and the beginning of the 1970s. It says here at the beginning of each chapter, it gives the dates, and it says March 10th to March 15th, 1969 for the first couple of chapters, the first section of chapters. So that's like at the very end of the 1960s. So I have a feeling that this war or political upheaval was at the end of the 1960s or beginning of the 1970s. And I don't remember what war this was. So if people can leave me a comment letting me know what war this book is set in, that would be good, because I'm really not sure. And finally, this book was talked about by Rachel Catherine and Destiny Sidwell and Sarah Caroli. It is Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This is a co-workers to lovers trope, and it focuses on two people who work in a hospital, Brianna and Jacob. Jacob is a really sweet character, and him and Brianna start their relationship communicating through letters, because Jacob has social anxiety and he doesn't really know how to like talk to women, and he's very shy, and other people in the office think he's like closed off and really rude because they do not realize he has social anxiety. And I just think that the buildup between Brianna and Jacob's relationship is very sweet. Jacob is so tender-hearted and kind and caring, and I just love Abby Jimenez's representation of somebody with anxiety, and I can definitely really strongly connect to Jacob's character, because while I'm typically really good in social situations, there are certain times in the past couple of years where I have been really socially awkward and afraid to approach certain social situations because I'm not sure how other people are going to react. And that's what Jacob goes through in his initial courtship of Brianna, and being afraid to tell him how he feels about her. And honestly, Jacob's character and Troy's character in the list of 10, you know who he reminds me of? I hate to bring him up again, but Chandler Bing from Friends, because he has social anxiety, and that is the reason why I related to the character of Chandler so well, and the characters of Troy and Yours Truly, and Jacob and Yours Truly, and Troy in List of 10, just because. So back when Friends was on TV originally, I knew nothing about social anxiety. I was not diagnosed with an anxiety disorder until 2019, right before COVID-19 happened. I'm sure there were underlying signs that I was anxious when I was younger, but I just never brought that up when I went to therapy when I was a teenager, or in the past years, because I've been going to counseling for a while, but I never really brought up my social anxiety or why I was always anxious in therapy until 2019, and then that's when I got my official diagnosis. I always thought that the reason why I was so socially anxious, socially unsure of myself sometimes, was because of my autism spectrum disorder, and I did not realize that I totally had another diagnosis of social anxiety. But now that I know that I have anxiety, I know how to manage it and how to handle myself better in social situations than I did before my diagnosis, because I remember before I got my diagnosis, when I was performing with Sohegan Valley Chorus, and I was getting really like anxious when I was performing and I was like on stage, and I got like really dizzy and dehydrated on a stage, and I had to like sit down on the riser. I think I was having an anxiety attack that day, and there were other people who noticed, and I'm glad that they noticed, because I was obviously nervous, and because I was having trouble focusing on my performance for various reasons that I don't want to talk about, but back then I never knew that I had social anxiety. That was in like 2017, and I'm sure the people who were in Sauhegan Valley Chorus with me at that time will remember which concert I'm talking about, because it was like the holiday concert in 2017. I had just had my audition for the Wizard of Oz PTA play like the week before, and the cast list was coming out. So I think, honestly, I don't think I was really focused on my performance completely, because I was nervous about the cast list for the play coming out, and that's why I was having an anxiety attack. But yeah, so back then I did not realize that I had anxiety, but now I do, and I know how to manage my symptoms better and control and have good coping mechanisms to deal with it. So and that's why I can relate to Jacob's character so well, and yours truly, because he uses the same coping mechanisms that I do to deal with my anxiety. Exercise is a big one, and so is journaling. So yeah, if you have read any of these books, let me know what you think of them. I highly recommend them to you. And thank you to these authors, Rebecca Yarros, Halli Gomez, Lynn Lachmann, and Abby Jimenez, for creating such relatable characters in your books. Have a great day, everybody.